Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's me again, Golden Blue Dude. Hey, if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. This channel is home of at least one college football video every single day. And once college basketball starts rolling around and college football starts dying down, I'll start pumping out some college basketball videos as well. So National Signing Day is over with. There were a few surprises. One massive surprise with the #1 overall recruit flipping from Florida State to Jackson State. That was crazy. That was a big deal. And of course, I made a video on that. There's a lot of sites out there that do recruiting class rankings. And it's hard to tell why is this one ranked here and why is it not ranked there, and it's higher here and lower there. So what I did is I went to 247, I went to Rivals, and I went to the consensus and looked at the rankings. I added them together and divided it and came out with the average. So this is the actual recruiting class based on the average on all the sites, not just one site. I wanted to be transparent as to how I came up with my rankings. So here we go. I'm going to run through the top 50 real quick. This is Oregon State. Their average is 52.66, but that was good enough to be number 50. Tied at number 48. First, Miami, Florida. Their average score, 49. Tied with them at number 48 is Colorado. Also, their average, 49. So at least they cracked the top 50, but their recruiting class is really, really small. It has some quality to it, but surprisingly small. The last time I checked, only 8 recruits for the 2022 class. Number 47, Northwestern. Good enough to get them in the top 50. I was a little surprised on that, but I do think Northwestern had a decent recruiting class for, well, Northwestern. Number 46, Illinois. Their average came out to 46.66. Got them to 46th. Hey, better than below 50. Number 45 is going to be Minnesota. Their average came out to 45.33. That's actually who West Virginia is playing in the Guaranteed Rate Bowl. This doesn't affect that bowl, but it kind of caught my attention because it's an opponent that we're going to be playing in a bowl. We have a tie for number 43, and this is an interesting storyline. The first team, UCF. Their average 42.33. They are not the highest ranked group of 5 team as far as their recruiting class goes, but tied with them, Florida. Yes, and these two teams are playing each other. Florida's average was also a 42.33. I didn't go back and actually break it down to see if there were any differences, but the average came out and they had the same exact score, and they're going to be playing in the bowl. So that's a nice little storyline right there. Number 42, UCLA. Their average came out to 41.66. For Chip Kelly, this is not a good recruiting class as far as rankings go, but for UCLA, it's not bad. Number 41, the first Big 12 team I'm going to mention, Texas Tech. Their average came out to 41. Not a very impressive class, but they did almost crack the top 40. Speaking of the top 40, number 40, Wisconsin. Their average came out to 40.33. Wisconsin, this is about average for Wisconsin. They recruit decent, but not great. Number 39, Cincinnati. Their average came out to 39.66. They are the highest ranked group of 5 team, and they do have a decent recruiting class for the 2022 recruiting cycle. Number 38, Arizona. Their average was 39. That actually kind of surprised me. That's a little higher than what I thought they would be. Number 37, Purdue. Their average came out to 38. Purdue was a surprise team this year. Maybe they can build on that. This is a decent recruiting class, but not elite. Tied at number 35. This one is a little surprising for me. Vanderbilt. This is a high recruiting. This actually blew my mind. I was not expecting Vanderbilt to be this high, but their average was 36.66, and they are tied in 35th with Utah, also 36.66. So having a recruiting class that has the same ranking as Utah, well done, Vanderbilt. Number 34, Boston College. Their average came out to 34.66. Another surprise to me. I was expecting them to be in the 50s, but a little bit higher, top 35 at least. Number 33, Rutgers. Their average came out to 32.66. Number 32, Maryland. Their average, well, 32. I do think this is a good recruiting class for Maryland, and they might be able to climb in the rankings in the ACC. Right above them, another ACC team. Number 31, Virginia Tech. Their average came out to 31.33. Justin Fuente is gone. We'll see how Virginia Tech does under the new coaching staff, but a big letdown. Justin Fuente was a big letdown at Virginia Tech. Now we're in the top 30. Number 30, Baylor. Their average came out to 31 on the dot. Hey, a top 30 recruiting class, not bad for the Baylor Bears. Dave Aranda is building something at Baylor. Number 29, Oregon cracking the top 30 despite losing Mario Cristobal, so that's a good sign. Their average came out to 29.66. Pretty good recruiting class, but it probably did take a hit because of their head coach leaving. That happens a lot. Number 28, West Virginia, my team. Their average came out to 29, good enough for 28th. Pretty good recruiting class. Now, according to Rivals, this would break the record from the recruiting class that Rich Rod had. It was ranked at number 25, way better than anything Dana Holgerson ever did at West Virginia. Number 27, another Big 12 team, Iowa State. Their average came out to 28, just enough to beat West Virginia. Decent recruiting class, still headed in the right direction under Matt Campbell, even though they did have a slightly disappointing season this year. Number 26, Ole Miss. Their average came out to 27. I think Ole Miss has a solid recruiting class. I think Lane Kiffin is doing very well at Ole Miss, and they could be competing for the SEC West for years to come if Lane Kiffin stays. Number 25, Oklahoma State. Their average came out to 27. Mike Gundy, he's a solid recruiter at Oklahoma State. He's been there for over 20 years, I believe. This is on par for what Oklahoma State does. Top 25 recruiting class. Number 24, Iowa. Their average 25.33. I thought Iowa would actually be a little bit higher on the list, but a little bit lower than what I thought they would be. But Iowa recruiting at a decent level, and they're going to be competitive in the Big Ten West. Number 23, South Carolina. Surprised the heck out of me. Their average came out to 24.33, so a good recruiting class for Shane Beamer. Number 22, Michigan State. Their average came out to 22.66. Michigan State had a great year this year, big bounce back year, 10-2, but Ohio State and Michigan outdid them just a little bit, even though Michigan State beat Michigan. They picked up 2 losses near towards the end of the season. Still a pretty good season for Michigan State and a good recruiting class to keep them going. Number 21, Indiana. Their score came out to 21. Tom Allen recruiting great at Indiana. I mean, Indiana, 21. That is great. I would have never imagined that. So I think Indiana's going to be competitive in the Big Ten. Tied at number 19, the first team, Mississippi State. Their average came out to 20. Mike Leach recruiting very well at Mississippi State. They're going to be a contender in the SEC West. Tied with them, another SEC West team, LSU. Their average also 20. Brian Kelly just got there, so we'll see what he does. But once again, solid recruiting class for LSU. Number 18, this is where Clemson lands. Their average came out to 19. Decent recruiting class for Clemson, but Dabo's done much better in the past. Are they sliding a little bit? Was this year a sign of things to come? I'm not saying this is a bad recruiting class. It's good, but compared to what he usually does, not quite up to par. Number 17 was a surprise as well, and that's going to be Arkansas. Their average came out to 17.33. Sam Pittman is doing an amazing job at Arkansas, and I expect them to be real contenders in the SEC West real soon. Number 16, this is the surprise of the day for me. Stanford. Their average came out to 17. They have a lot of academic restrictions. That is an amazing recruiting class for Stanford. Now the top 15. Number 15, Auburn. Their average came out to 16.33. Auburn pretty much always recruits like this, so this is a solid recruiting class for Auburn. They were very close to making the top 10. Number 13, Tennessee, with an average of 14.33. Josh Heupel has Tennessee on the rise. Georgia better be watching out for Tennessee because they're coming. Tied with them at number 13. This one surprised me as well. Missouri, another SEC East team. Also 14.33 was their average. Number 12, Florida State. Their average came out to 13. So despite losing number 1 overall recruit, Florida State still almost had a top 10 recruiting class. That's amazing. Just imagine if they would have landed that recruit. They would definitely been top 10, probably top 5. Number 11, this is where Oklahoma lands. Their average came out to 11.66. Solid recruiting class, even though Lincoln Riley left for USC. Hey, Brent Venables is going to be a great coach at Oklahoma. Now the top 10. Starting at number 10, Kentucky. Another team that's going to be biting on the heels of Georgia. Their average came out to number 11. So the SEC East is going to be loaded with talent. This is amazing, guys. Number 9, Michigan. Their average came out to 8.66. Jim Harbaugh is doing what Jim Harbaugh does, and that's recruit at an excellent level. This is a pretty good recruiting class for Michigan. Number 8, North Carolina. Their average came out to 8.33. Mike Brown, man, he's turned North Carolina into a recruiting machine. Had a letdown year this year, but hey, they're still recruiting at a high level. Number 7, Notre Dame. Their average came out to 6.66. That's kind of ironic right there, but close to the top 5 recruiting classes. Number 6, this is where Penn State's going to be. Their average came out to 6.33. James Franklin recruiting at a very high level at Penn State. I am impressed with this recruiting class for Penn State. Now the top 5. Number 5, 5, Texas. They were number 5 across the board on every site. An excellent recruiting class. Steve Sarkisian is going to have a lot of talent to work with. Texas had a terrible year this year, 5-7, losing to Kansas. You're going to have to do better than that, Steve Sarkisian, if you want to keep your head coaching job at Texas. Number 4, Ohio State, the Buckeyes. They were number 4 across the board. The Buckeyes doing what the Buckeyes do, and that's recruiting at an elite level. Ryan Day not missing a beat. Number 3, Georgia. They were number 3 across the board as well. Georgia always having an elite recruiting class, but not number 1 this year. Now the number 2 team, and that's Alabama. Their average came out to 1.66. They were number 1 on one of the sites, number 2 in the other 2 sites. So they barely lost out on that number 1 spot. Still excellent recruiting class for Nick Saban, but you got to know that probably aggravates him that they're not number 1 in the recruiting class. But Alabama will do what Alabama does. That's win the SEC and get to the playoffs. Coming in at number 1, the number 1 recruiting class, Texas A&M. Their average came out to 1.33. Excellent recruiting class. Jimbo Fisher recruiting at an elite level, beating Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, and a whole bunch of other elite teams. So Texas A&M grabs the number 1 overall recruiting class. They were number 1 on 2 sites and number 2 on 1 site. So their average came out the highest, 1.33. There you go. That's all I got for you for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.